I have had a breakthrough in how I think about caps. All this year, I've been working with 1.5s and discovering all the cool tricks and techniques that turned out to be buried within them. And as it turns out, those lessons wind up applying to the C caps we've known and loved for more than a decade. And yes, there turn out to be way more of them than we realized. Drex here from Drex Factor Poi, sharing with you the love of poi spinning and flow arts to benefit your body and brain. And I'm wrapping up a year of some pretty old school tech poi math nerdery by pulling a whole bunch of pieces together. Buckle in. Before we dive in, I just want to give a quick shout out to the friends of the channel. Big thanks to Dark Monk, Flow DNA, Flow Fests, Flow Toys, Juggling Calling, Pyroterra Light Toys, Spinballs, and Ultra Poi for helping to make the videos on this channel possible. You can learn more about all these amazing companies and the work that they're doing to support flow artists like yourself by checking out the links that I've got down in the description of this video. And a special thanks to the first non-business friend of the channel, Johnny Howard. Thanks so much for your support, Johnny. So if you've been following along with my headier content this year, you'll know that I have been down a super deep rabbit hole when it comes to Poi 1.5s. I first realized several years ago that these 1.5s were actually just caps performed along a linear handpath, but the implications of that didn't become clear to me until earlier this year. I've now created 2 videos on the topic that I will link to down in the description as well as up in the cards if you're watching on YouTube. But the coup de grace finally came last month when I realized that the venerable C cap, that's right, the first cap ever recognized, could be tweaked using the same techniques I was using for 1.5s. In fact, all caps that I play with on a regular basis are interrelated in ways that I was not prepared for. I'm seriously having a Doc Brown, "Great Scott!" moment over here, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Okay, so where to start? I guess technically with triquetra versus pendulum? I love this hybrid, and I hope that you do too. More than a decade ago, I noticed something kind of strange about it though. It wasn't actually a triquetra. See, the part on top is more like a linear isolation, and the part on bottom is more like a box mode 4-pedal anti-spin flower. I can't remember if I worked that out on my own or whether it occurred to me when I saw a simulation of the move that Alien John had uploaded. But there was definitely an aha moment when I realized that triquetra was actually a cap. Wait, actually, we should probably back up a second now that I think about it. Way back in 2009, a French poi spinner by name of Damien Boy Bouvier made a post on the Home of Poi forums, analyzing a trick he'd seen Yuta Imamura doing in a performance video. He noticed Yuta using a C-shaped handpath as the poi kept spinning, because the hand was sometimes moving in the same direction as the poi and sometimes against it. The pattern incorporated elements of both in-spin and anti-spin poi movement. He dubbed the concept a cap, or continuous assembly pattern. He realized that one could create new poi patterns by cutting and pasting elements of existing poi patterns that overlapped in specific positions. It opened up a whole new world of exploring the patterns that poi can make. And then, about 5 years ago, I put together 2 things that I hadn't previously realized were related to each other. I started my poi videos with a couple of vlogs on 1.5s, and specifically finding several different versions that varied with timing and direction modes. And what I realized years later was that these 1.5s were in fact caps. They involve cutting and pasting together a pendulum or linear isolation depending upon your perspective, and a 2-pedal in-spin flower. Now, we're going to stick a pin in this for a moment, because the original C cap, though it looks vastly different from a 1.5, also involves switching the poi back and forth between a pattern with 3 downbeats and a pattern with 1 downbeat. And if that's confusing, don't worry, we will come back to it. Okay, so fast forward to earlier this year, and I got a comment on a tutorial I'd posted on Instagram. In it, I was performing what I considered to be a butterfly 1.5. That is, the 1.5 pattern, but performed in such a way that the overall impression of the pattern could be considered to be moving in opposites. That comment sent me down a rabbit hole, realizing that there were multiple 1.5 patterns that we'd never seen before. Because once you think of a 1.5 as being a pattern based upon a flower, that means you can change how it looks by reflecting it across different axes. I've covered this concept in depth in several videos this year. You can transform a pattern by transposing it over either a vertical or horizontal axis, and potentially discover variations on the pattern that you didn't know existed before. This is how you can transform a linear isolation into both a 4-pedal anti-spin flower as well as a 2-pedal in-spin flower. I found not only were there 1.5 patterns that we'd never seen before, but also that several other patterns that we had seen before fit into the pattern of a 1.5. But what exactly is that pattern? Basically, it involves tracing out half of the handpath with a flower that is a 3 downbeat move. For example, as you perform a 4-petal anti-spin flower, there will be 3 points where the poi passes beneath your hand. It's an odd mathematical hiccup that anti-spin flowers have 1 fewer beats than the total number of petals in them. That said, you never get to perform all 3 beats in a 1.5 because you're only performing half the pattern, but you can still think of it as a piece of a 3-beat, like a 4-petal anti-spin or a 2-petal in-spin. The other half is tracing out a single-beat pattern, a pendulum, extension, linear isolation, or point isolation. And this same pattern that is switching back and forth between a 3 and 1 beat poi move is exactly the pattern seen in a C cap. Going one way, it's half of a 4-petal anti-spin flower, and going the other way, it's half of an extension. See? I told you we'd get there. Okay, so here's where I'm going to pull together a bunch of different pieces. See, it turns out that there's 4 different formulas for these caps, and depending upon how you stick them together, you wind up with a 1.5, a C cap, or a host of other caps. Some we've seen before, and some we haven't. Let me break it down for you. It took me a while to realize this, but both 1.5s and C caps have at their core the exact same pattern. For half the move, the poi is a 3-beat pattern and the other half is performing a 1-beat pattern. The only difference is whether that 1-beat pattern is spinning in the same or opposite direction as the 3-beat pattern was. In the 1.5, the direction of the spin reverses, and in the C cap, it stays the same. The other difference, of course, is whether they expand out to a full circular or C-shaped handpath. Both are options. You can honestly think of the C-shaped pattern as being the same thing as the circular one, but just that the top has been flipped over. So when we get down to it, really what we're talking about here is a single core pattern. That is a cap with a 3-beat on one side and a 1-beat on the other side. I'm calling this a 3-to-1 cap. And of course, that 1-beat can be either spinning in the same direction as the 3-beat or the opposite direction. So our 3-to-1 caps have 2 different expressions, and I'm referring to them as 3-to-1 caps and 3-to-1 caps. And of course, each has 2 options for being expanded out into a handpath. They can expand out into a C-shaped handpath, which gives us the classic C cap, or a circular handpath, which I'm going to refer to as an O cap. So we've got 2 expressions of the core 3-to-1 cap pattern and 2 ways to expand each out into a full cap. Let's see what they yield. I'm going to start with 3-to-1 caps, expanding out into O caps, because we've seen them already and we call them 1.5s. Doing this, we wind up with the classic V-pedal 1.5 that we're used to from the 1.5 beat weave and 1.5 butterfly. Then flip it across a horizontal axis to get a diamond anti-spin 1.5. A pattern we've known about for years, but until this past year didn't connect the dots to realize it was another form of the classic 1.5. Flipping this across a vertical axis, we get the H-pedal in-spin 1.5, one of 2 bizarre and unique patterns that came out of analyzing 1.5s in this way. We get the other once we flip this pattern across a horizontal axis and wind up in the box anti-spin 1.5. Interestingly, it turns out I did wind up doing this once many years ago, but didn't put together the pieces to realize it was a 1.5. Okay, so now what happens if we repeat all of these same operations, but with the C-shaped handpath instead? As we expand out from a linear to a C-shaped handpath, the first thing you're probably going to notice is that the resulting pattern looks a bit like a squashed triquetra. This will become a theme here. Reflecting this pattern across a horizontal axis, we wind up with something that has a pendulum going one way and a V-pedal in-spin flower going the other way. That's a new one to me. Reflecting the pattern across a horizontal axis, we get what looks like a box anti-spin going one way and a linear isolation going straight down the other way. I am not sure if this can be performed upside down, but I'll give it a shot. Finally, if we transform this pattern across a horizontal axis, we wind up with our final version of this cap. Half of an H-pedal in-spin flower with a point isolation going across between the 2 sides. This one would never have crossed my mind. Cool! Now let's check out the 3-to-1 C caps, because they're the other type of cap that we've seen a lot of over the years. Remember, this means that the poi will be spinning the same direction the entire way through the pattern. Starting out, we have a pendulum going across the top of the C with a V-pedal in-spin flower going back the other way. I haven't seen this one done before either. Reflecting this across a horizontal axis, we wind up with the C cap that we all know and love. It's a diamond anti-spin flower with an extension. Or, I guess in this position, it could also be considered a pendulum, depending upon how you want to look at it. Flipping this across a vertical axis, we wind up with an H-petal in-spin flower coupled with a linear isolation going across the middle. Once again, this one is new to me. For the final transformation, let's flip this across a horizontal axis where we wind up with a box anti-spin versus point isolation pattern. Interestingly, Alien John himself modeled this pattern back in the day for Surreal and paired it with the diamond anti-spin C-cap to great effect. And for our final stop on the 3-to-1 cap journey, let's check out those 3-to-1s with no direction change in the form of O caps. So we're back to a fully circular handpath. Starting off, we have another cap that looks suspiciously like a triquetra. In this case, it's a diamond anti-spin coupled with a pendulum. It's a funky looking triquetra for sure, but people are going to call it out anyway, so I might as well too. Transforming this pattern across a horizontal axis, we get something that looks suspiciously like a one-petal in-spin flower. What it actually is a pendulum coupled with the top part of a V-petal in-spin flower. Flipping it across a vertical axis, we wind up with a pattern I hope y'all will recognize from earlier in this video. That's the same triquetra-like cap that we use in Triquetra versus Pendulum, just turned upside down. That's right, it's a part of all of this too. Finally, if we transform the pattern across a horizontal axis, we arrive at our final variation, an H-petal in-spin coupled with a point isolation. Yep, this one is new to me again too. So all this means that we now have 16 different variations on our 3-to-1 caps, depending upon poi direction and handpath shape. Wild! Now, this also means we now have a lot more caps to explore. How many? Well, let's do the math. So if we just take into account combining individual patterns together, given 16 individual patterns and taking out duplicates, that means that we get 136 possible combinations of any two of these caps put together. But we also have to think about timing and direction, which means that for each combination of O caps, there are 4 modes to be had and 2 modes for each C cap, because they can only move together or apart. So that leaves us with a grand total of 408 possible combinations of caps. If I've done my math right, that is. Wow. I'm clearly not going to demonstrate each combination here or even as an extra on my Patreon because I'd be doing nothing else for weeks. What I will do is demonstrate each individual cap for you before I bring this to a close. So let's check that out. So, I probably will come back and visit individual families of these caps just to explore what happens when you start putting them together. But I did want to have a video that explained all of these pieces and summarized my findings, pulling all 3-to-1 caps together into one overarching framework. It's been a really fascinating year. Does all this make sense? Am I way too far out in the weeds? Is there another dimension to all these patterns that I haven't considered? Leave me a comment. I would love to hear your feedback. Need help keeping track of all these patterns, old and new, and how they're related? So do I. I've made a PDF available to download at my website showing how all these pieces fit together. You can find that at a link in the description or up in the cards if you're watching on YouTube. In the meantime, please help me get all these ideas out there into the world. Make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe to help keep the conversation going and to help other people to find my work. This video would not have been possible without the kind support of all of these amazing people right here. These are my Flow patrons on Patreon, and they, along with the people listed down in the description, make these videos possible through their support of my channel on Patreon. Thank you one and all. If you enjoy the content that I create, whether it be tutorials, vlogs, or long rants on how all the caps are connected in a vaguely tinfoil hat kind of way, you can help me make it happen by signing up to support it at patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi. There you can also get a host of rewards such as early access to all of my content, a say in what content I produce in the future, plus extras and behind the scenes content as well. Help me in my mission to bring flow arts and poi spinning to people all over the world by signing up. Thank you in advance. And with that, I'm officially tapped out on caps for the year. Thank you for joining me on this very strange trip, and I hope it's inspired more than a few of you out there. I'm going to leave a link to a playlist of other videos I've done in this vein down in the description, as well as up on screen if you're watching this video on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an amazing new year full of flow and fun. See you with a new video on Wednesday. Peace.